The 911 operator paused and asked, "Is the person still there?" I knew I was in danger. My hands shook as I dialed 911, crouched in my bathroom with the door locked and my back pressed against the cold tile wall. The scratching sounds at my apartment door had been going on for 20 minutes now, deliberate, methodical scraping that made my skin crawl. 911, what's your emergency? Someone's trying to break into my apartment, I whispered into the phone. I'm at 4247 Maple Street, apartment 3B. I can hear them at my door. Okay, ma'am. I'm dispatching officers to your location now. Can you tell me your name? Sarah. Sarah Martinez. There was a pause. Not the normal kind where they're typing information or checking something on their computer. This pause felt different. Loaded. Sarah Martinez, the operator repeated slowly. And you said 4247 Maple Street? Yes, apartment 3B. Please, I think they're trying to pick the lock now. The sounds are getting louder. Another pause. My heart hammered against my ribs. Ma'am, I need to ask you something. The operator's voice had changed, still professional, but with an edge I couldn't place. Is the person still there? The question hit me like ice water. Is the person still there? Not, are they still trying to get in, or, do you still hear the sounds? But is the person still there, as if the operator knew exactly who was outside my door? My breath caught. The scratching had stopped. I hadn't mentioned it was one person. I'd said someone and I never specified it was a single individual. But somehow, this 911 operator knew. I don't hear the sounds anymore, I managed to whisper. Officers are en route. Please stay on the line. But I was barely listening. My mind was racing, connecting dots I'd been too scared to see before. 3 weeks ago, when I'd called the police about Jake following me home from campus, the officer who responded had barely taken notes. 2 weeks before that, when I'd reported him sitting in his car outside my building for hours, they'd said there wasn't enough evidence for a restraining order. Jake Brennan. My ex-boyfriend who couldn't accept that I'd finally found the courage to leave him 6 months ago. Jake, whose father was some big shot in the county commissioner's office. Jake, who always seemed to be one step ahead of me, who knew things he shouldn't know, who appeared wherever I went like he had advance warning. Ma'am? Are you still there? The operator's voice cut through my spiraling thoughts. Yes, I'm here. The officer should arrive in about 8 minutes. Can you see anything from your windows? I crawled to my bathroom window and peered through the blinds. The parking lot looked empty except for Mrs. Chen's Toyota and the broken streetlight Jake had complained about to management last month, the same streetlight that conveniently left the area around my building in shadows. Wait. Jake had complained about that streetlight. When we were still together, he'd made a big show of calling the property manager, saying he was worried about my safety with such poor lighting. At the time, I thought it was sweet. Now I realized he'd been planning even then. I don't see anyone, I told the operator, but my voice sounded hollow in my own ears. Because I was finally understanding the terrifying scope of what I was dealing with. This wasn't just an obsessive ex-boyfriend. This was something bigger, more organized. And if Jake had someone inside the 911 dispatch system, nowhere was safe. The officers arrived exactly 12 minutes later, not the 8 the operator had promised. I watched from my peephole as 2 uniformed cops approached my door, their flashlights cutting lazy arcs across the hallway. Something about their body language seemed wrong. Too casual. Too familiar with the building layout. Ma'am? Police. You called about a break-in attempt? I opened the door, keeping the chain lock engaged. The taller officer had a name tag reading Morrison. His partner was younger, maybe mid-20s, with Rodriguez stitched above his badge pocket. Thank you for coming. Someone was trying to get into my apartment about 20 minutes ago. Scratching at the lock, making noise at the door. Officer Morrison nodded, but he wasn't writing anything down. Did you see who it was? No, I was too scared to look. I just heard the sounds and called 911. Uh-huh. Morrison exchanged a glance with Rodriguez. Mind if we take a look around? Check the door frame, maybe walk the perimeter? I let them in, watching as they made a show of examining my front door. Morrison crouched down, running his fingers along the lock mechanism. I don't see any scratches or tool marks, he said. Lock looks fine to me. But I could see them. Tiny silver scratches around the keyhole that definitely hadn't been there yesterday. I opened my mouth to point them out, then stopped. Morrison was looking right at them. He had to see them. Sometimes these old buildings settle, Rodriguez added helpfully. Makes weird noises. Could have been pipes, maybe the unit upstairs. Mrs. Chen is 78 and goes to bed at 9 every night, I said. And it's Thursday, she volunteers at the hospital until midnight on Thursdays. Rodriguez's pen froze over his notepad. How do you know Mrs. Chen volunteers on Thursdays? The question caught me off guard. She mentioned it once. In the laundry room. But that wasn't true. Jake had told me that, months ago, when we were still together. He'd made some comment about how predictable people's schedules were, how Mrs. Chen was always gone Thursday nights from 8 to 12:30. I'd asked him how he knew that, and he'd laughed it off, said he was just observant. We'll file a report, Morrison said, standing up and brushing off his knees. But honestly, Miss Martinez, there's no sign of forced entry. Could have been a raccoon, maybe someone who had the wrong apartment and realized their mistake. At 11:15 at night? Happens more than you think, Rodriguez said. People get confused, especially if they've been drinking. They left 5 minutes later, promising to increase patrols in the area. I watched from my window as they walked to their squad car, but instead of getting in, Morrison pulled out his cell phone. He talked for maybe 30 seconds, then hung up and said something to Rodriguez that made the younger officer laugh. My blood ran cold. I grabbed my own phone and scrolled to Jake's contact. I blocked his number weeks ago, but I could still see our old text history if I went through the blocked messages folder. There it was, from 3 months ago. Asterisk Officer Morrison helped me file that insurance claim for my car. Dad knows his family, good people. You can trust cops like that, asterisk. Jake had mentioned Morrison by name. Specifically. 3 months before tonight. I sank onto my couch, the pieces clicking together with horrible clarity. The delayed response time. The operator who knew details I hadn't provided. Morrison's convenient blindness to the obvious scratches on my lock. The phone call in the parking lot. Jake wasn't just watching me. He had people everywhere, dispatch, patrol officers, maybe more. He'd been building this network for months, maybe longer. And I'd walked right into it every time I called for help. My apartment suddenly felt like a cage, and I was the only one who didn't know I was trapped. I couldn't stay in the apartment. Not tonight. Not knowing what I knew now. I threw some clothes into my backpack along with my laptop, phone charger, and the pepper spray my sister had given me for my birthday. My hands were still shaking as I tried to think of somewhere safe to go. Not my parents' house, Jake knew where they lived. Not my best friend Emma's dorm, he'd shown up there before, claiming he just wanted to check on me. The university library. It stayed open 24 hours during finals week, and there were always students around. Security cameras everywhere. Jake couldn't do anything there without witnesses. I slipped out through my building's back exit, the one that led to the dumpsters and the employee parking lot of the Chinese restaurant next door. It added 10 minutes to my walk, but it kept me away from the main street where Jake usually parked when he was watching. The library was buzzing with caffeine-fueled students even at 12:47 a.m. I found a corner table on the third floor, positioned so I could see both the elevator and the stairwell entrance. If Jake somehow tracked me here, I'd have warning. I opened my laptop and stared at the screen, trying to organize my thoughts. I needed evidence. Real evidence that even Jake's connections couldn't make disappear. First, I pulled up the county website and searched for public records. Jake's father, Richard Brennan, wasn't just some big shot, he was the deputy county commissioner in charge of public safety budgets. That meant he had direct oversight of police department funding, dispatch operations, even the 911 system. My stomach dropped. No wonder my complaints kept getting buried. I dug deeper, following links and cross-referencing names. Officer Morrison had received 3 commendations in the past 2 years, all signed by Richard Brennan. The most recent one was dated just 6 weeks ago, right around the time I'd filed my second stalking report. A reward for services rendered. I opened a new document and started typing everything I could remember, with timestamps. Asterisk March 15th, 2:30 p.m. Jake waiting in campus parking lot after my psychology class. Claimed he was just in the neighborhood. How did he know my schedule had changed? Asterisk. Asterisk March 22nd, 8:15 p.m. called police about Jake following me home. Officer Morrison responded alone, unusual? Took minimal notes, said no law broken unless Jake made direct threats. Asterisk. Asterisk April 3rd, 11:20 a.m. attempted to file restraining order. Desk sergeant said insufficient evidence. Paperwork disappeared when I came back the next day to check status. Asterisk. The pattern was becoming clearer with every entry. Jake always seemed to know when I talked to police, when I tried to get help. He'd even known about my appointment with a campus counselor last week, had sent me flowers with a note saying he hoped I was getting the help I needed. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my blocked messages folder again, looking for anything I'd missed. There, a text from April 8th, asterisk Sarah, I know you're scared, but you don't need to involve other people. We can work this out ourselves. The police have better things to do. Asterisk. He'd sent that message 4 hours after I'd called the non-emergency line to ask about filing a complaint. 4 hours. Not 4 days or 4 weeks, 4 hours. Someone had told him immediately. Excuse me, are you Sarah Martinez? I looked up to see a security guard standing next to my table. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I forced my voice to stay steady. Yes? There's a gentleman downstairs asking about you. Says you dropped your wallet in the parking lot? I hadn't dropped anything. My wallet was in my backpack, right where I'd put it. What did he look like? Tall guy, brown hair, wearing a navy jacket. Seemed really concerned about getting it back to you. Jake. He'd found me in less than 2 hours. But how? Then I remembered, my phone. I grabbed it and went into settings, my fingers flying across the screen. There it was, buried in the location services menu, an app called Safety Share that I didn't remember downloading. According to the timestamp, it had been installed 5 months ago. When we were still together. When Jake had access to my phone. Miss? The security guard was still waiting. Should I tell him you're here? No, I said, shoving my laptop into my backpack. Tell him you couldn't find me. And don't let him pass the front desk. I was already moving toward the back stairwell as I spoke, my mind racing. If Jake could track my phone, nowhere was safe. But I couldn't turn it off. I needed it for evidence, for calling for help if things got worse. I had to get smarter. I had to start thinking like him. And I had to do it fast, because Jake was done playing games. The back stairwell was empty, my footsteps echoing off concrete walls as I descended to the basement level. The library had an old service tunnel that connected to the campus steam system. Emma had shown it to me during freshman year when we'd gotten locked out of her dorm. It was technically off limits, but the door was never secured properly. I slipped through the maintenance area, past humming boilers and pipes wrapped in yellowing insulation. The tunnel stretched for about 200 yards before emerging near the communications building. If Jake was watching the main library exits, he wouldn't see me leave this way. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Asterisk Sarah, this is getting ridiculous. I just want to talk. Why are you making this so difficult? Asterisk. My blood went cold. I blocked Jake's original number weeks ago, but he was texting from a different one now. How many phones did he have? How many ways to reach me? I screenshotted the message, then kept walking. Evidence. I needed to document everything. The tunnel exit brought me out behind the communications building, where a cluster of satellite dishes pointed toward the night sky. I checked the time, 1:23 a.m. The campus was mostly deserted except for a few students walking between the library and late-night study areas. I needed somewhere with security cameras but not predictable enough for Jake to anticipate. The 24-hour fitness center in the student union had both, plus multiple exits and a staff member always on duty. As I walked, I pulled up the Safety Share app on my phone, trying to understand how it worked. The interface looked innocent enough, just a location-sharing service that let trusted contacts know where you were for safety purposes. But when I dug into the settings, I found something that made my stomach lurch. Jake wasn't just tracking my current location. The app had been logging everywhere I went, creating a detailed database of my movements. 3 months of data showing my class schedule, when I went grocery shopping, which route I took home, even how long I spent in each location. He'd been studying me like a science experiment. But as I scrolled through the logs, an idea began forming. If Jake was using this app to track me, maybe I could use it against him. The data went both ways. While he could see where I was, the app also kept records of when those locations were accessed and by whom. I screenshotted every page, saving the evidence to a cloud storage account Jake didn't know about. Then I did something that felt dangerous but necessary. I left the app running. If I deleted it now, Jake would know I discovered his surveillance. Better to let him think he still had the advantage while I gathered proof. The fitness center was nearly empty when I arrived. Just 2 students on treadmills and a bored-looking staff member scrolling through his phone behind the front desk. I badged in with my student ID and found a corner table in the main area where I could see all the entrances. My phone buzzed again. Another unknown number, *I saw you leave the library. We need to talk tonight, Sarah. This can't wait any longer, *. My hands started shaking. He'd been watching the building, had seen me leave somehow despite my careful exit. But which entrance had he been monitoring? How many people did he have helping him? I opened my laptop and started cross-referencing the names I'd found earlier. Officer Morrison wasn't the only connection between Jake's father and local law enforcement. Deputy Commissioner Richard Brennan sat on 5 different municipal committees, including the Emergency Services Oversight Board and the Public Safety Technology Committee. That last one caught my attention. I clicked through to the meeting minutes from 6 months ago, right around the time Jake and I had started having problems. There was a discussion about upgrading the 911 dispatch system, implementing new call logging software, and improving interagency communication protocols. Richard Brennan had been the primary advocate for these changes. The 911 operator's strange questions suddenly made perfect sense. It wasn't just that Jake had someone inside dispatch. His father had helped design the system that gave him access to call records, response logs, maybe even live call monitoring. My phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, but the ringing started again immediately. Different number. Then another. He was calling from multiple phones, trying to force me to answer. On the 4th attempt, I picked up, putting the call on speaker so I could record it with my laptop. Hello, Jake. Sarah. His voice was calm, controlled, but I could hear the underlying tension. You're being unreasonable. I'm trying to help you, but you keep running away. Help me with what? You're clearly having some kind of breakdown. Calling 911 with false reports, hiding in random buildings in the middle of the night. People are starting to notice. The gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced. This was what he'd been doing for months, making me question my own perception of reality. But now that I understood the scope of his surveillance network, his manipulation tactics seemed transparent and pathetic. What people, Jake? A pause. The police officers who responded tonight are concerned about you. They think you might need professional help. Officer Morrison, you mean? Your dad's friend? The silence stretched for almost 10 seconds. When Jake spoke again, his voice had changed. The fake concern was gone, replaced by something colder. I don't know what you think you figured out, Sarah, but you're in over your head. The line went dead. I stared at my phone screen, Jake's threat echoing in my ears. You're in over your head. The mask had finally slipped completely. No more pretending to be the concerned ex-boyfriend. Now I was dealing with the real Jake. The one who'd spent months building a surveillance network just to control me. My hands were surprisingly steady as I saved the recorded phone call to my cloud storage. Finally, I had him admitting to police connections, acknowledging the false reports angle he was trying to build against me. It wasn't enough yet, but it was a start. The fitness center's automatic doors whooshed open, and I looked up to see someone in a navy jacket scanning the room. My heart hammered as I ducked behind my laptop screen, but it was just another student heading for the locker rooms. Still, Jake's threat had been clear. He was done playing games. I needed to move again, but first I had to understand exactly what I was up against. I pulled up the county website and searched for Richard Brennan's committee memberships, looking for patterns I'd missed before. There, the Emergency Communications Modernization Project, launched 8 months ago with Richard Brennan as project director. The budget allocation was $2.3 million, funded through a federal grant for improving interagency coordination and response times. But buried in the technical specifications, I found something that made my blood run cold. The new system included enhanced caller identification protocols and real-time information sharing between dispatch and field units. In plain English, that meant 911 operators could now access detailed background information about callers instantly, and that information could be shared with responding officers before they even arrived on scene. Perfect tools for silencing inconvenient complaints. I screenshotted the documents, then dug deeper into the project timeline. The system had gone live 6 weeks ago, right around the time my police reports started disappearing and officers began treating me like an unstable nuisance instead of a stalking victim. My phone buzzed with a text from yet another unknown number. * building security just called in a wellness check request. Concerned about a distressed student. You should probably leave before they find you. *. The message was sent at 2:14 a.m. I looked around the fitness center. The staff member behind the desk was still scrolling through his phone. The 2 students were still on treadmills. No one looked like they'd called security. Unless someone had called it in from outside the building. I packed up quickly, my mind racing through possibilities. Jake could have called campus security claiming he was worried about my mental state, maybe even impersonating a family member or counselor. With his father's connections, he probably knew exactly which phrases to use to trigger a wellness check. The back exit led to a loading dock area behind the student union. I slipped out into the cold night air, then immediately pressed myself against the building's brick wall. Sure enough, I could see a campus security golf cart pulling up to the main entrance, its yellow warning lights flashing. 2 uniformed security officers got out and headed inside. I recognized one of them, Officer Patricia Wells, who'd given a safety presentation in my dorm last semester. She'd seemed competent and caring then, but now I wondered if she was part of Jake's network too. I couldn't trust anyone in an official capacity anymore. My phone rang again. This time I recognized the number, Emma, my best friend from high school who went to state about 3 hours away. I answered immediately. Sarah? Thank God. I've been trying to call you for an hour. Emma, what's wrong? Your ex-boyfriend called me tonight. Jake something? He said you were having some kind of mental health crisis and asked if I'd heard from you. He seemed really worried, but something felt off about the whole conversation. My stomach dropped. Jake was already working to poison my support network, getting ahead of whatever evidence I might try to present. What did you tell him? Nothing. I don't even know why he had my number. You never gave it to him, did you? I hadn't. Which meant Jake had found Emma's contact information some other way. Social media, maybe, or through mutual friends. The scope of his surveillance was even broader than I'd realized. Emma, I need you to listen carefully. Jake is stalking me. He has connections in the police department and the 911 system. He's been tracking my phone, monitoring my calls, and now he's trying to make people think I'm having a breakdown. Jesus, Sarah. Are you somewhere safe? For now. But I can't trust official help. His father has too much influence. What do you need me to do? The question was exactly what I'd hoped to hear. Emma was studying journalism at State. She understood evidence, documentation, the importance of building an airtight case. I'm going to send you everything I've gathered so far. Phone recordings, screenshots, document links. If something happens to me, if I disappear or if Jake tries to have me committed somewhere, you'll have proof. Sarah, maybe you should just leave town. Come stay with me for a while. I'd considered it, but running would only give Jake more ammunition for his mental breakdown narrative. A stable person doesn't flee across state lines in the middle of the night. A paranoid person does. I can't run. He'll use it against me. I have to expose this whole thing before it gets worse. Through the loading dock area, I could see the campus security officers emerging from the student union. One was talking into his radio, probably reporting that the distressed student wasn't where the caller had claimed she'd be. Jake was making me look unreliable even to people trying to help. But as I watched the security cart drive away, I realized Jake had made his first real mistake. He'd called in a false report to campus security, which meant there was now an official record of his interference. If I could get access to those call logs, I'd have proof he was actively sabotaging my credibility. For the first time in hours, I smiled. Jake wanted to play games with emergency services? Fine. But he'd forgotten that those same systems he was corrupting also kept detailed records. And I was about to turn those records into his downfall. I spent the next hour moving between campus buildings, using my student ID to access computer labs and study rooms while staying away from main thoroughfares. Each time I settled somewhere new, I'd upload more evidence to the cloud storage account I created using Emma's school email address as the recovery contact. By 3:47 a.m., I had documented 17 separate incidents over the past 4 months where Jake had demonstrated impossible knowledge of my activities, police responses, or schedule changes. The pattern was undeniable, but I needed something more concrete than circumstantial evidence. That's when I remembered Professor Chen's digital forensics class from last semester. She taught us about metadata in electronic communications, how every text message and phone call left digital fingerprints that most people never thought to examine. I pulled up the blocked messages folder on my phone and started analyzing the technical details of Jake's texts. The timestamps were revealing. His messages consistently arrived within minutes of my interactions with police or campus security. But more importantly, the message routing information showed something that made my pulse quicken. 3 of Jake's texts had been sent through a relay server registered to Brennan Consulting LLC. I cross-referenced that company name with county business records. Brennan Consulting was owned by Richard Brennan, Jake's father, and according to the filing documents, it provided communication and data management services to municipal agencies. Jake wasn't just using his father's political connections. He was literally using his father's business infrastructure to monitor my communications. My phone buzzed with another call from an unknown number. This time I let it ring while I used my laptop to trace the caller ID information through a reverse lookup service Emma had shown me for her journalism projects. The number was registered to a cellular account under the name Municipal Emergency Services Cooperative, the same organization that managed the county's 911 dispatch system. Jake was calling me from inside the emergency services network. I screenshotted everything, then made a decision that felt reckless but necessary. I answered the call and immediately started recording. Sarah, I know you're scared, but this has gone far enough. Jake's voice was tight with barely controlled anger. You're making yourself look unstable with all this running around campus in the middle of the night. How do you know where I am, Jake? Campus security called it in as a wellness check. They're concerned about your erratic behavior. That's interesting, because I just watched those security officers leave the student union 20 minutes ago. They didn't find any distressed student, did they? A pause. Sarah, you need help. Real help. I've talked to some people, and we think. We? Who's we? People who care about you. Dr. Morrison from the psychology department thinks you might benefit from a temporary evaluation. Dr. Morrison. Not Officer Morrison, Dr. Morrison. I pulled up the university directory on my laptop while keeping Jake talking. I've never met any Dr. Morrison in the psychology department, Jake. She's new. She specializes in cases like yours. Stress-induced paranoia, relationship trauma that manifests as persecution delusions. There was no Dr. Morrison listed in the psychology department. But there was a Dr. Sarah Morrison in the psychiatry department at County General Hospital, the same hospital where Jake's father served on the board of directors. My blood went cold as I realized what Jake was building toward. A psychiatric hold. An involuntary commitment based on reports of erratic behavior, paranoid delusions, and multiple false emergency calls. It would be the perfect solution from his perspective. I'd be locked away where I couldn't gather evidence or contact anyone who might believe me. My credibility would be destroyed permanently. And Jake could play the concerned ex-boyfriend who tried so hard to get me help. Jake, I'm not going to any evaluation. I'm not paranoid, and I'm not having delusions. The 911 calls, Sarah. 3 false reports in 2 weeks. The police are starting to think you're crying wolf. False reports? Someone was trying to break into my apartment tonight. There were scratch marks on the lock. Officer Morrison didn't see any scratch marks. His report says you appeared agitated and possibly under the influence of something. That was a lie. I'd been completely sober, and Morrison had definitely seen the scratches. He'd looked right at them before claiming they didn't exist. I have photos of the scratches, Jake. Another pause, longer this time. Photos can be faked, Sarah. Especially when someone is in the middle of a psychological episode. And I have recordings of our conversations. Including this one. The silence stretched for almost 15 seconds. When Jake spoke again, his voice had changed completely. The fake concern was gone, replaced by something that made my skin crawl. Recording conversations without consent is illegal in this state, Sarah. Just another sign of deteriorating judgment. He hung up. I sat in the empty computer lab, staring at my phone as the implications sank in. Jake wasn't just trying to gaslight me anymore, he was systematically building a legal case for having me committed. And with his father's connections throughout the medical and emergency services systems, he probably had enough corrupt officials to make it happen. But Jake had made another mistake. He'd revealed too much about his surveillance capabilities, and he'd underestimated how much evidence I'd already gathered. Most importantly, he'd threatened me while I was recording from inside a government communications system. Federal crime territory. I opened a new email and started typing a message to Emma, attaching every piece of evidence I'd collected. If Jake wanted to play with psychiatric holds and false reports, I'd show him what real documentation looked like. The game was about to change, and this time, I'd be the one controlling the rules. I hit send on the email to Emma, then immediately started composing a second message, this one to the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center. If Jake was using federal communications infrastructure to stalk me, that made it a federal matter. His father's local connections wouldn't help him against federal investigators. But as I typed, my laptop screen flickered and went black. I pressed the power button frantically, but nothing happened. The computer lab's overhead lights were still on, and the other terminals around me seemed to be working fine. Just my laptop had died, right in the middle of uploading evidence to federal servers. My hands were shaking as I checked my phone. The email to Emma had gone through, but the FBI complaint hadn't been submitted. And now I had a new text from another unknown number, asterisk having computer problems? Technology can be so unreliable when you're stressed, asterisk. Jake was monitoring my internet activity in real time. Somehow, he'd remotely killed my laptop to stop me from contacting federal authorities. The reach of his surveillance was even more sophisticated than I'd imagined. I grabbed my phone and headed for the computer lab exit, but stopped when I heard voices in the hallway. 2 campus security officers were walking past, their radios crackling with static. Wellness check on Sarah Martinez, last seen in the communications building. Possible 5150 hold if we can locate her. A 5150 hold. 72-hour involuntary psychiatric detention. Jake was moving fast now, mobilizing multiple systems against me simultaneously. I ducked back into the computer lab and tried to think. The campus was crawling with security looking for me. Jake could track my phone and kill my internet access, and he was building a legal framework to have me committed. I needed help from someone outside his sphere of influence. That's when I remembered Professor Martinez, no relation, despite the shared surname. She taught investigative journalism and had won awards for exposing municipal corruption in the next county over. If anyone would understand the scope of what Jake and his father were doing, it would be her. But first, I had to deal with my compromised phone. I couldn't turn it off completely, I needed it for evidence, but I could limit Jake's access to my communications. I pulled up the settings menu and started systematically disabling every app that had network permissions. Social media, email, even the weather app. Anything that could send or receive data. Then I enabled airplane mode and turned on just the voice recorder function. If Jake wanted to track me, he'd only get my last known location from 10 minutes ago. I slipped out of the computer lab through a side door that led to the building's service corridors. These maintenance areas connected most of the academic buildings on campus, another thing Emma had shown me during our freshman exploration adventures. If I stayed in the tunnel system, I could avoid the security patrols. The corridors were dimly lit and filled with the constant hum of HVAC equipment. I followed the main tunnel toward the humanities building, where Professor Martinez had her office. It was almost 4:30 a.m. now, but she was notorious for working late on her research projects. My footsteps echoed off concrete walls as I walked, and every sound made me jump. Jake's threat kept replaying in my head, "You're in over your head." Maybe I was. Maybe I should have just run when I first realized the scope of his surveillance network. But running wouldn't have stopped him from targeting the next woman who tried to leave him. The tunnel branch toward humanities was blocked by a locked gate I didn't remember from freshman year. A new security measure, probably installed after some incident I'd missed. I'd have to surface and cross open ground to reach Professor Martinez's building. Through a grimy window at ground level, I could see the main quad. 2 security cars were parked near the library, their occupants scanning the area with flashlights. A third cart was slowly circling the student union. They were coordinating their search pattern like they were looking for an escaped convict. Or someone dangerous enough to require immediate psychiatric intervention. I checked my phone, still in airplane mode, but the battery was down to 37%. If it died completely, I'd lose all the evidence stored locally. I needed to reach Professor Martinez soon. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the service door and stepped into the cold morning air. The humanities building was only 200 yards away, but it felt like crossing a minefield. I was halfway there when I heard the radio chatter, possible visual on the subject, northeast quad, moving toward humanities. They'd spotted me. And now Jake would know exactly where I was headed. I broke into a run, abandoning stealth for speed. The humanities building's main entrance was 50 yards away, but I could hear the security cart's electric motor whining as it accelerated in my direction. The beam of a high-powered flashlight swept across the ground behind me, getting closer. "Sarah Martinez, this is campus security. We need you to stop and speak with us." The voice came through a megaphone, echoing across the empty quad. I kept running, my backpack bouncing against my spine with each step. 20 yards. 10. I reached the building's glass doors and yanked on the handle, locked. Of course it was locked at 4:42 a.m. I fumbled for my student ID, hands shaking as I swiped it through the card reader. Red light. Access denied. The security cart pulled up behind me, its headlights throwing my shadow against the glass doors. I heard car doors slamming, footsteps on pavement. "Ma'am, we just want to talk." No one's in trouble here. But that was Officer Wells' voice, and I could hear the lie in it. She knew exactly what kind of trouble I was in. Jake had probably briefed her personally. I swiped my ID again, more slowly this time. Green light. The lock clicked open and I dove through the doors, letting them slam shut behind me. The humanities building was dark except for emergency lighting, but I knew the layout. Professor Martinez's office was on the third floor, room 314. I took the stairs 3 at a time, my phone bouncing in my pocket. Behind me, I could hear the security officers trying their own cards on the door reader. Wells would have master access. I had maybe 60 seconds before they followed me inside. The third floor hallway stretched ahead of me, office doors lined up like identical tombstones. 308, 310, 312. There. Room 314, with a light glowing under the door. Professor Martinez was actually here. I knocked frantically, trying to keep my voice low. Professor Martinez? It's Sarah from your fall journalism class. I need help. Footsteps inside the office, then the door opened to reveal a woman in her 50s wearing glasses and a paint-stained NYU sweatshirt. Professor Martinez looked like she hadn't slept in 24 hours, but her eyes were sharp and alert. Sarah? What are you doing here at, good God, it's almost 5 in the morning. I'm being stalked by my ex-boyfriend. He has connections in the police department and the 911 system. They're trying to have me committed to stop me from exposing the corruption. Professor Martinez's expression shifted from confusion to focused attention. Come in. Quickly. I slipped into her office just as I heard the stairwell door bang open 2 floors below. The security officers were inside the building now, probably checking each floor systematically. Tell me everything, but make it fast, Professor Martinez said, closing her office door and turning the deadbolt. And keep your voice down. I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshots I'd saved locally, the tracking app data, the text message routing information, the municipal business records linking Jake's father to the communications infrastructure. Jesus Christ, she whispered, scrolling through the evidence. This is a RICO case waiting to happen. How long has this been going on? 6 months since we broke up, but he's been planning longer. His father runs the Emergency Services Modernization Project, and they've been using it too. Heavy footsteps in the hallway outside cut me off. Someone was checking office doors, rattling handles. Professor Martinez grabbed my arm and pulled me toward a supply closet in the corner of her office. Get in there. Don't make a sound. I squeezed into the narrow closet among boxes of paper and old textbooks. Through the crack under the door, I could see Professor Martinez settling back at her desk, pulling up what looked like student papers on her computer screen. 3 sharp knocks on her office door. Campus security, ma'am. We're looking for a student who may be having a mental health crisis. Sarah Martinez. Have you seen her tonight? I've been here grading papers since midnight, Professor Martinez called back. Haven't seen anyone except maintenance staff. Mind if we take a quick look around? She might have tried to hide somewhere. My heart hammered against my ribs. If they searched the office, they'd find me crammed in this closet like a scared child. But Professor Martinez's voice remained steady. I'm sorry, but I'm not letting anyone search my office without a warrant. These are confidential student records I'm working with. A pause. Then Wells' voice again, ma'am, this student is potentially dangerous to herself. We have authorization for wellness checks. Then show me the paperwork. Until then, you can wait in the hallway. I heard muttering, then radio chatter too quiet to make out words. After what felt like forever, the footsteps moved away from the door. Professor Martinez waited another full minute before opening the closet. They're gone for now, but they'll be back with whatever authorization they think they need, she said grimly. We have maybe 30 minutes before this building is crawling with people who want to disappear you. She was already moving to her computer, pulling up contacts and typing rapidly. I'm sending your evidence to 3 different investigative journalists I trust, plus a federal prosecutor who specializes in civil rights violations. If something happens to you, this won't stay buried. Professor, there's something else. Jake called me from inside the emergency services system. He's using federal communications infrastructure to stalk me. Her fingers froze over the keyboard. You recorded that call? I nodded and played the audio file where Jake's voice came through crystal clear, along with the technical data showing the call had originated from municipal emergency services equipment. Holy shit, Professor Martinez breathed. This just became a federal case. Professor Martinez was still uploading files when her computer screen flickered and went black, just like my laptop had an hour earlier. They're in the system, I whispered. Jake can kill internet access remotely. She stared at the dead screen for a moment, then grabbed an old flip phone from her desk drawer. Burner phone. No internet, no GPS, just basic self-service on a prepaid account. She dialed a number from memory. David? It's Carmen. I need an emergency favor. Yes, I know what time it is. While she talked, I heard voices in the hallway again. Different voices this time, not campus security. Male voices, professional and calm. The kind of calm that meant serious trouble. Building secured at 5:17 a.m., subject last seen entering 3rd floor. Professor Martinez ended her call and motioned me back toward the closet. Federal agents are coming, but not for another 2 hours. We need to keep you hidden until then. Those aren't campus security officers outside. I know. Her voice was grim. Jake's escalating faster than we expected. Through the office door, I could hear systematic searching. They were checking every room methodically, and they had keys. Real keys, not just student access cards. Professor Martinez grabbed a thick manila envelope from her filing cabinet and stuffed it into my backpack. Property deeds, financial records, communication contracts, everything I've been investigating about municipal corruption in this county. If they take you, make sure that gets to the FBI field office in Richmond. What do you mean, if they take me? Before she could answer, we heard a key turning in her office lock. The door opened to reveal 2 men in dark suits. Not campus security, not local police. They looked federal, but something about their bearing felt wrong. Too casual, too familiar with the building layout. Professor Martinez, the taller one said. I'm Agent Collins, FBI. We understand you may have had contact with Sarah Martinez tonight. Professor Martinez stood slowly, her hands visible on her desk. I'd like to see some identification, please. Agent Collins flashed a badge, but from my position in the closet, I could see Professor Martinez's face. Her expression didn't change, but her right hand moved slightly, our agreed signal that something was wrong. We're investigating reports of terrorist communications, the second man said. Ms. Martinez has been using federal systems to transmit threatening messages. Terrorist communications. They were building a completely different legal framework now, something that would bypass psychiatric holds and go straight to federal detention without charges. That's a very serious accusation, Professor Martinez said carefully. Do you have a warrant? National security exemption. We need to know if Sarah Martinez contacted you tonight, and if so, what communications or materials she may have shared. I could see Agent Collins scanning the office, his eyes lingering on the supply closet door. My phone was still in airplane mode, but I slowly activated the voice recorder anyway. If these were real federal agents, I needed documentation. If they weren't. I've been alone in my office all night, Professor Martinez lied smoothly. Grading papers, working on research. I haven't had any contact with students. Ma'am, we have electronic evidence that Ms. Martinez accessed this building 43 minutes ago using her student ID. 43 minutes. They had precise timestamps, which meant they were plugged into the same surveillance network Jake was using. Real FBI agents would have approximate times from witness reports, not exact electronic records. Students access this building at all hours during finals week, Professor Martinez said. That doesn't mean she contacted me specifically. The second fake agent stepped closer to her desk. Professor, obstruction of a terrorism investigation is a federal felony. We know Ms. Martinez is mentally unstable and has been making threats against government officials. If you're harboring her, you're putting yourself and others at risk. That confirmed it. Real federal agents investigating terrorism wouldn't be concerned about someone's mental health status, they'd be focused on actual threats. These men were using the same psychiatric angle Jake had been pushing, just wrapped in federal authority. My phone buzzed silently against my leg. A text message, which should have been impossible with airplane mode enabled. I carefully pulled it out and checked the screen. Asterisk Sarah, I know you're listening. This ends now. Come out voluntarily and we can still do this quietly. Keep hiding and it becomes a federal manhunt, asterisk. Jake had sent the message to my phone from inside the same room. One of these fake agents was him. I looked more carefully at the two men through the crack in the closet door. The second one, the shorter one who'd been doing most of the talking, had the same build as Jake. Same height, same hair color. But he was wearing glasses and had facial hair I'd never seen before. A disguise. Jake was standing 10 feet away from me, impersonating a federal agent. Which meant the real Agent Collins' badge had been stolen or forged, and Professor Martinez was in serious danger just by being in the same room with him. I had to make a choice, stay hidden and let Jake potentially hurt her, or reveal myself and risk whatever Jake had planned next. My hand moved to the closet door handle as I made my decision. The game had gone far enough. Time to end it face to face. I took a deep breath and pushed open the closet door, stepping out with my hands visible but my phone still recording. Hello, Jake. The shorter fake agent froze, his hand moving instinctively towards something under his jacket. But it was the taller one, the real Agent Collins, I realized, who spoke first. Ms. Martinez, I'm going to need you to step away from your accomplice and put your hands where I can see them. My stomach dropped. The real federal agent thought Professor Martinez and I were working together on whatever terrorist plot Jake had fabricated. Jake's fake identity was so convincing that he'd managed to get legitimate federal backup for his stalking operation. Agent Collins, I said carefully, keeping my voice steady. The man standing next to you isn't FBI. His name is Jake Brennan, and he's been stalking me for 6 months using his father's connections in the emergency services system. Jake finally spoke, and his voice was different, deeper, with a slight accent I'd never heard before. Agent Rodriguez, FBI Counterterrorism Division. Ms. Martinez is experiencing a psychotic break. She's been making these delusional accusations for weeks. He was good. If I hadn't lived through months of his manipulation, I might have believed the performance myself. But I could see the telltale signs, the way he held his left shoulder slightly higher when he was lying, the micro-expression around his eyes that he'd never been able to control completely. Professor Martinez, I said, not taking my eyes off Jake. Look at his hands. Jake has a scar on his right knuckle from when he punched a wall during one of our fights. Agent Rodriguez should have calluses from firearms training, but Jake's never held a gun in his life. Professor Martinez squinted at Jake's hands, then her eyes widened slightly. Agent Collins, I think you should verify your partner's credentials. What the hell are you talking about? Collins snapped. Rodriguez showed me his badge downstairs. We drove here together from the Richmond field office. But Jake's composure was starting to crack. The accent was slipping, and his posture had shifted back to the familiar slouch I remembered from when we were together. He pulled out what looked like an FBI radio and spoke into it. Control, this is Agent Rodriguez. Subjects are becoming agitated and making false accusations. Requesting immediate backup at current location. The radio crackled with static, then a voice responded, copy that, Rodriguez. Units are en route, ETA 4 minutes. My blood went cold. Jake wasn't just impersonating one federal agent, he had access to FBI radio frequencies and was calling in real backup under false pretenses. His father's communications infrastructure was even more sophisticated than I'd realized. Agent Collins, I said desperately, call your field office right now and ask them to verify Agent Rodriguez's assignment to this case. Use your own phone, not the radio. Collins looked annoyed, but he pulled out his cell phone and dialed. While he talked in low tones, Jake stepped closer to me, his fake federal authority making him bold. Sarah, you caused enough trouble for one night. This ends here. The only thing ending here is your little surveillance operation. I held up my phone, making sure both agents could see it was recording. I have documented evidence of you using federal communications equipment to stalk me, impersonating law enforcement officers, and filing false reports to emergency services. Jake's mask finally slipped completely. You have nothing that will stand up in court. Especially not after your psychiatric evaluation confirms what everyone already knows about your mental state. Agent Collins ended his phone call and turned to stare at Jake with an expression I'd never want directed at me. Funny thing, Rodriguez. Richmond Field Office has no record of you, no Agent Rodriguez assigned to any terrorism case, and no authorization for any operation in this county tonight. The silence in the room was deafening. Jake's hand moved toward his jacket again, and I realized he might actually be armed despite what I'd told Professor Martinez about his inexperience with guns. Outside in the hallway, I could hear heavy footsteps and radio chatter getting closer. Jake's backup was arriving, and I had no idea if they were more fake agents or real law enforcement who'd been fed false information about a terrorist threat. Nobody move, Collins said, drawing his weapon and pointing it at Jake. Hands where I can see them, now. But Jake was smiling, and that terrified me more than anything else that had happened tonight. Agent Collins, you're about to have a very bad morning, Jake said calmly. Because those officers coming up the stairs think you're the terrorist. The footsteps in the hallway were getting louder, and I could hear multiple voices coordinating through radios. Agent Collins kept his weapon trained on Jake while trying to reach his own backup on his phone, but the call wasn't going through. Cell tower interference, Jake said with that same terrifying smile. Amazing what you can do with the right equipment and municipal contracts. My stomach dropped as I realized the scope of what we were walking into. Jake hadn't just impersonated a federal agent, he'd orchestrated an entire false flag operation using his father's communications infrastructure. The officers coming up those stairs thought they were responding to a legitimate terrorist threat, with Agent Collins as the primary suspect. Professor Martinez, I whispered urgently, is there another way out of this office? She shook her head, her face pale. Fire escape, but it's been broken since last semester. Maintenance never fixed the ladder. The voices in the hallway were close enough now that I could make out individual words. Armed federal agent gone rogue. Hostages on third floor. Shoot to kill authorized. Shoot to kill. Jake had convinced responding officers that Agent Collins was a terrorist with hostages. Collins was going to die unless we could prove Jake's deception in the next 60 seconds. Agent Collins, I said quickly, Jake's father is Richard Brennan, Deputy County Commissioner. He controls the emergency communications budget and has contracts with federal agencies for technology upgrades. Jake's been using that access to monitor and manipulate official channels. Collins' eyes flicked to me for a split second, but he kept his weapon aimed at Jake. That's a serious accusation, but it doesn't change the fact that your boyfriend here has been impersonating federal law enforcement. Ex-boyfriend, I corrected automatically, then caught myself. Now wasn't the time for personal details. The point is, he's probably been feeding false information to whatever tactical team is about to come through that door. They think you're the threat. Jake's smile widened. Sarah's getting closer to understanding how deep this goes. Too bad she figured it out too late. Heavy boots thundered up the stairwell, accompanied by the metallic sound of tactical gear. Through the office window, I could see red and blue lights flashing in the quad below, at least 6 vehicles, maybe more. Jake had called in a full-scale emergency response. Attention, this is Lieutenant Morrison with County SWAT, a voice boomed through a megaphone in the hallway. Agent Collins, release your hostages and surrender immediately. You have 30 seconds to comply. Morrison. The same name as the corrupt patrol officer who'd ignored the scratches on my door. Jake's network of compromised law enforcement was even larger than I documented. Agent Collins' face went white as he realized his situation. This is Agent Michael Collins, FBI Richmond Field Office, badge number 2847, he called toward the door. I am not holding hostages. I have one suspect in custody for federal impersonation charges. Collins, you are not authorized to operate in this jurisdiction, Morrison's voice responded. Drop your weapon and exit with hands visible, or we're coming in. Professor Martinez grabbed my arm and pulled me toward her desk. The envelope I gave you, she whispered. It has Morrison's financial records. He's been taking payments from Brennan Consulting for 18 months. I quickly pulled out my phone and took photos of the documents she'd stuffed in my backpack earlier. Bank statements showing regular deposits of $2,500 from Brennan Consulting LLC to Morrison's personal account. Always on the 15th of each month, always labeled as consulting fees. Jake was watching me document the evidence, but he wasn't trying to stop me anymore. If anything, he looked amused. Time's up, Collins, Morrison announced. We're breaching in 10 seconds. That's when I understood why Jake wasn't worried about the evidence I was gathering. He expected none of us to survive the next few minutes. Morrison's SWAT team was going to accidentally kill everyone in this room while attempting to neutralize the fake terrorist threat. The perfect solution, all witnesses eliminated, all evidence destroyed, and Jake walking away as a traumatized victim who tried to help authorities stop a dangerous situation. I looked at Agent Collins, who was still pointing his weapon at Jake despite the tactical team preparing to breach the door. Professor Martinez was frantically trying to upload files to something on her computer, even though her internet connection had been severed. We had maybe 5 seconds before armed officers burst through that door expecting to find a terrorist with hostages. Agent Collins, I said desperately, when they breach, Jake's going to claim you were holding us at gunpoint. It's our word against his, and his father controls half the people in this building. Collins' jaw tightened, but he didn't lower his weapon. Then we better make sure our word is the one that gets heard. The office door exploded inward. Everything happened in slow motion and lightning speed simultaneously. The door splintered off its hinges as 3 SWAT officers poured into the room, automatic weapons raised. Agent Collins immediately dropped his gun and raised his hands, shouting his badge number and field office. But Lieutenant Morrison was already pushing through behind his team, his face a mask of grim determination. Federal agent down, Morrison barked into his radio. Hostages secured. We need medical and a crime scene unit up here now. Except Agent Collins wasn't down. He was standing with his hands up, very much alive and conscious. I saw the confusion flicker across the tactical officers' faces. This wasn't matching whatever scenario Morrison had briefed them on. Lieutenant, one of the officers said, the Fed's not. Taser him, Morrison interrupted. Subject is non-compliant. But Jake made his first real mistake then. He stepped forward, trying to position himself as the heroic witness Morrison needed to sell his narrative. Officers, thank God you're here, Jake said in his fake Agent Rodriguez voice. Agent Collins went rogue about 10 minutes ago. He was threatening to kill the women if his demands weren't met. The problem was, Jake had forgotten he was supposedly FBI. And the tactical officer nearest him, a young guy whose nameplate read Chin, had obviously been briefed that all federal agents in the room were hostile. "You're under arrest too," Officer Chin said, swinging his weapon toward Jake. "Nobody told us about a second Fed." Morrison's face went rigid. "Chin, stand down. That's Agent Rodriguez, he's been working with us." "Sir, our briefing said one rogue agent, no federal backup authorized in the building," Chin replied, not lowering his weapon. "Rodriguez isn't on my contact list." I could see Morrison's carefully orchestrated plan falling apart in real time. He told his tactical team they were neutralizing a single terrorist agent, but now he had to explain why there was a second federal agent they'd never been briefed about. Professor Martinez seized the moment of confusion. "Officers, I can prove who everyone in this room actually is," she announced, her voice cutting through the tension. "I have security footage from my office camera." Morrison spun toward her. "Ma'am, step away from that computer. This is an active crime scene." "The computer's been dead for 20 minutes, she said calmly. "But the camera feeds to a backup server in the basement. Everything that happened here is recorded." Jake's face went white. In all his sophisticated surveillance planning, he'd missed the one camera that actually mattered, the one recording him impersonating a federal agent and orchestrating a false emergency response. "That footage won't show anything useful," Morrison said quickly. "These cameras are notoriously unreliable." Officer Chen was still covering Jake with his weapon, and I could see the younger man's tactical training kicking in. Something wasn't adding up about the whole situation, and he knew it. "Lieutenant, I'm calling this in to Captain Rodriguez for clarification," Chen said. "Too many inconsistencies in the briefing versus what we found here." "Rodriguez?" Jake's voice cracked slightly. "You mean Captain Rodriguez?" "Yeah, County SWAT commander." "Why, you know him?" The look of pure panic that crossed Jake's face was beautiful. He'd chosen Agent Rodriguez as his fake identity without knowing there was a real Captain Rodriguez who would immediately recognize the impersonation. Morrison was frantically trying to regain control. "Chen, belay that radio call. We need to secure the scene first before." "Sir, respectfully, protocol says I verify federal agent identities immediately." Chen was already keying his radio. "Control, this is Chen. Need verification on Agent Rodriguez, FBI counterterrorism, currently on scene at Humanities Building." The response came back within seconds. "Chen, we show no FBI agents authorized in your location. Repeat, no federal agents cleared for county operations tonight." Agent Collins seized his moment. "Officers, I'm Agent Michael Collins, FBI Richmond Field Office. I came here following up on a stalking case and found this man impersonating federal law enforcement. I need you to detain him while I contact my supervisor." Morrison's hand moved toward his sidearm, but Officer Chen was faster. "Everyone freeze. Nobody moves until we sort this out." And that's when my phone, still recording everything, buzzed with an incoming call from Emma's number. Perfect timing, as always. I answered Emma's call on speaker, desperate for any connection to the outside world that Jake couldn't control. "Sarah? Thank God. I've been trying to reach you for hours. I got your evidence files, and I contacted that FBI agent you mentioned, Agent Sarah Kim from the Richmond Cybercrime Division. She's been investigating Brennan Consulting for federal contract fraud." Officer Chen's head snapped toward my phone. "Ma'am, did she say FBI Cybercrime Division?" "Emma, you're on speaker with police officers," I said quickly. "Can you patch Agent Kim through?" "She's right here." "Hold on." A new voice came through my phone, crisp and professional. "This is Agent Sarah Kim, FBI Cybercrime Division." "To whom am I speaking?" "Agent Kim, this is Agent Michael Collins, Richmond Field Office," Collins said, relief flooding his voice. "I need immediate verification of my credentials and backup at my current location." "Collins? You're supposed to be on vacation this week. What are you doing in active operation?" My heart sank. If Collins was supposed to be on vacation, it meant he'd responded to this situation without proper authorization. Jake might have been counting on that, baiting a legitimate agent into an off-the-books investigation that would undermine his credibility. "Ma'am, I received reports of federal impersonation connected to an ongoing stalking case." I felt it warranted immediate response. Morrison stepped forward, his confidence returning. "Agent Kim, this is Lieutenant Morrison, County SWAT. Agent Collins has been operating outside his jurisdiction and holding civilians at gunpoint. We need federal coordination for his arrest." "Lieutenant Morrison," Agent Kim's voice turned ice cold. "Are you the same Morrison who's been receiving monthly payments from Brennan Consulting? Because those financial records were forwarded to our office 3 hours ago as part of a federal corruption investigation." The tactical officers all turned to stare at Morrison, whose face had gone pale. Officer Chen slowly shifted his position so his weapon wasn't pointed at Agent Collins anymore, now it was angled toward his own lieutenant. "Agent Kim," I said into the phone, "the man claiming to be Agent Rodriguez is actually Jake Brennan, son of Deputy Commissioner Richard Brennan. I have recordings of him using federal communications equipment to stalk me." "Sarah Martinez?" Agent Kim's voice sharpened. "We've been looking for you. Your friend Emma provided us with evidence of systematic abuse of federal communications infrastructure. Are you safe?" "For now, but Jake orchestrated this whole emergency response to eliminate witnesses. He's been using his father's municipal contracts to monitor 911 calls and corrupt police responses." Jake finally spoke up, abandoning his fake accent completely. "This is ridiculous. These women are clearly having some kind of shared psychotic episode. Lieutenant Morrison can vouch for my identity." But Morrison was backing toward the office door, his hand definitely on his sidearm now. "I don't know what any of you are talking about." I responded to a legitimate terrorist threat. "Morrison," Officer Chin said firmly, "put your hands where I can see them." "Agent Kim, are you requesting we detain Lieutenant Morrison for federal questioning?" "Absolutely. And I need the suspect claiming to be Agent Rodriguez held as well. We have warrants being prepared for Richard Brennan and 17 other individuals connected to this communications fraud case." 17 other individuals. Jake's corruption network was even larger than I'd imagined, but the FBI had been building their own case independently. All my evidence gathering had done was provide the final pieces they needed to move forward with arrests. Morrison suddenly lunged for the door, but Officer Chen was ready for him. Sir, stop right there. The lieutenant's hand was on his gun when Professor Martinez calmly said, Agent Kim, you should know that everything happening in this room is being recorded by building security cameras, including Lieutenant Morrison's attempt to flee federal custody. Morrison froze, his face a mask of defeat. Jake slumped against the wall, the fight going out of him as he realized his father's entire operation was collapsing around him. Through the window, I could see more vehicles arriving in the quad below, these ones with federal plates. It was finally over. Agent Kim's backup arrived faster than I'd expected. Within minutes, the office was filled with actual federal agents who looked nothing like Jake's amateur performance. These agents moved with practiced efficiency, separating us for individual interviews while crime scene techs began documenting everything. I was sitting in Professor Martinez's chair, giving my statement to Agent Kim, who had driven down from Richmond personally, when she showed me something that made my blood run cold. Sarah, we found this in Lieutenant Morrison's patrol car, she said, sliding a manila folder across the desk. Take a look at page 3. The folder contained what looked like a psychological evaluation report with my name on it. According to the document, I'd been diagnosed with severe paranoid delusions with violent tendencies by Dr. Sarah Morrison at County General Hospital. The report was dated today and recommended immediate involuntary commitment for a minimum of 6 months. Dr. Morrison is Richard Brennan's sister-in-law, Agent Kim explained. She's been signing off on psychiatric holds for anyone who gets too close to their operation. We found similar reports for 3 other women who tried to file complaints against Jake. My hands shook as I read the fabricated diagnosis. They described me as increasingly erratic and potentially dangerous to public officials. The report even referenced my multiple false 911 calls and harassment of emergency services personnel. This was their endgame, I whispered. If the fake terrorism thing didn't work, they were going to have me committed based on falsified psychiatric records. And it would have worked, Agent Kim said grimly. Dr. Morrison has been county mental health director for 8 years. Her signature carries enormous weight with commitment proceedings. We found evidence she's helped disappear at least 12 people who threatened the Brennan family's interests. Through the office window, I watched as Jake was led away in handcuffs. He looked smaller somehow, deflated without his fake federal authority and his father's protection. But as he passed the window, he turned and looked directly at me with an expression that made my skin crawl. Even in custody, Jake was smiling. Agent Kim, I said urgently, Jake doesn't look worried enough. What if this isn't over? She followed my gaze to where Jake was being loaded into a federal transport vehicle. What do you mean? Look at him. He's acting like he knows something we don't. What if Richard Brennan has contingency plans we haven't discovered yet? Agent Kim's phone rang before she could respond. She answered with a sharp Kim here, then her face went pale as she listened. When? She asked. How long ago? A pause. Jesus Christ. We're on our way. She hung up and immediately started gathering her files. Sarah, I need you to come with us. Richard Brennan didn't wait for our warrant. He's barricaded himself in the County Emergency Services building with access to the entire 911 system. My stomach dropped. What does that mean? It means he can monitor every emergency call in the county, redirect response units wherever he wants, and potentially shut down 911 service for 40,000 people. Agent Kim was already heading for the door. Your ex-boyfriend's father just turned the entire emergency services system into his personal hostage. Professor Martinez looked up from where she was being interviewed by another agent. Sarah, be careful. If Richard Brennan is half as smart as his son, he's got more surprises waiting. As we rushed toward the federal vehicles outside, I couldn't shake the image of Jake's smile. He'd known this was coming. Even as his own arrest was happening, he'd known his father was implementing some kind of scorched earth protocol. Agent Kim, I said as we reached the parking lot, how many people could die if someone weaponizes the entire county 911 system? Her grim expression told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't the end of Jake's revenge, it was just the beginning. The emergency services building was lit up like a Christmas tree when we arrived, every window glowing against the pre-dawn darkness. Federal vehicles surrounded the perimeter, their red and blue lights painting the brick facade in alternating colors. Agent Kim's radio crackled with updates as we approached the command post. Brennan's been inside for 47 minutes, the incident commander briefed us. He's got administrative access to the entire 911 system and he's already started making changes. We've had 3 emergency calls redirected to dead zones in the past 20 minutes. My stomach clenched. What kind of emergencies? Cardiac arrest, possible overdose, and a structure fire. Response times delayed by an average of 18 minutes because units were sent to wrong addresses. People were dying because Richard Brennan was covering his tracks. The scope of his willingness to hurt innocent people was staggering, but it also gave me an idea. Agent Kim, Jake always said his father was obsessed with maintaining control. What if we give him an illusion of control while we cut off his actual access? She looked at me skeptically. What do you mean? Let me talk to him. He thinks I'm just Jake's unstable ex-girlfriend. He won't see me as a real threat. While I keep him distracted, your tech people can work on isolating his access. Agent Kim shook her head immediately. Absolutely not. You're a civilian, and Richard Brennan has already proven he'll kill to protect his operation. But I'm the one person he wants to talk to, I pressed. I'm the reason his whole network got exposed. He's probably been planning what he'd say to me for months. Before Agent Kim could respond, her radio squawked, Command, we've got another redirected call. House fire with children trapped, units sent 12 miles in wrong direction. Brennan's escalating. The incident commander looked at Agent Kim, then at me. What exactly are you proposing? I pulled out my phone and opened the recording app. Richard Brennan wants to blame me for destroying his family. Let him. Give him a chance to monologue about how this is all my fault, how Jake was just trying to protect me, whatever narrative he's built in his head. Narcissists like him can't resist explaining how clever they've been. While you keep him talking. Your people trace his access points and shut them down one by one. He won't realize he's losing control until it's too late. Agent Kim studied me for a long moment. You understand he might try to hurt you once he figures out what's happening? I thought about Jake's smile as he was arrested, about the fake psychiatric report that would have disappeared me for 6 months, about the women who tried to report Jake before me and had been silenced. He's been trying to hurt me for 6 months, I said. At least this way, I get to hurt him back. The plan took 12 minutes to set up. FBI tech specialists positioned themselves at the 3 main access points to the building's communication systems while Agent Kim fitted me with a nearly invisible wire. The incident commander established overrides for the most critical 911 functions, but Richard Brennan still had control over non-emergency services and could redirect routine calls. Remember, Agent Kim said as we approached the building's front entrance, keep him focused on you and Jake. The longer he talks, the more access points we can identify and neutralize. My hands were steadier than I'd expected as I walked up to the glass doors. Through the windows, I could see Richard Brennan sitting at what looked like the main dispatch console, multiple monitors glowing around him like a command center. He was older than I'd imagined, maybe mid-60s, with the same build as Jake but graying hair and wire-rimmed glasses. I knocked on the glass. He looked up, and for a moment, confusion flickered across his face. Then recognition dawned, followed by something that might have been satisfaction. Richard Brennan walked to the door but didn't unlock it. Instead, he spoke through an intercom system. Miss Martinez. I've been wondering when we'd have a chance to chat. Mr. Brennan. I think there are some things we need to discuss. He smiled, the same cold smile I'd seen on Jake's face so many times. Oh, I think we're well past discussion. But please, come in. Let's finish what you started. The lock clicked open with an electronic buzz. I stepped inside, very aware that Agent Kim and her team were listening to every word, and that somewhere in this building were the controls that could save or doom every emergency call in the county. You've caused quite a lot of trouble for my family, Richard Brennan said, leading me toward the dispatch center. Jake really cared about you, you know. All he wanted was to make sure you were safe. Safe from what? From yourself, obviously. Your instability, your tendency toward paranoid delusions. Jake was trying to get you help. I bit back my first response and instead asked, help like the fake psychiatric evaluation Dr. Morrison prepared? 6 months of involuntary commitment for reporting stalking? His smile widened. Jake showed me some of your text messages, Sarah. The threat you made, the irrational behavior. Dr. Morrison's evaluation was completely justified. Behind him, I could see red lights blinking on several monitors. Agent Kim's team was already working to isolate his access points. But we needed more time. I'd like to hear those threatening messages, I said, pulling out my phone. Maybe you could play them back for me? Richard Brennan's expression shifted as he realized I was recording our conversation. For the first time, he looked uncertain. Actually, I continued, I'd like to hear all of it. How long were you planning this? How many other women has Jake stalked with your help? How many emergency calls have you redirected over the years? The uncertainty vanished, replaced by cold anger. You have no idea what you destroyed. Jake had a future in public service. Our family has served this county for 3 generations. By corrupting emergency services and silencing women? By maintaining order. His voice rose sharply. By keeping unstable people from making false accusations against good men. More red lights appeared on the monitors behind him. Agent Kim's team was making progress, but Richard Brennan was starting to notice his system responding slowly. You know what I think? I said, stepping closer to the dispatch console. I think you were never protecting Jake. I think Jake was protecting you. How much federal money did Brennan Consulting steal through those emergency services contracts? His face went white. You don't know what you're talking about. $2.3 million, right? Federal grants that were supposed to improve emergency response times, but instead funded a surveillance network for your family's personal use? Richard Brennan lunged toward the console, his hands flying over the keyboard. You want to see what real emergency services disruption looks like? But when he hit enter, nothing happened. The screen showed error messages. Agent Kim's team had cut his primary access while I kept him distracted. Looking for this? Agent Kim's voice came through the building's intercom as she and 6 other agents entered through the rear door. Richard Brennan, you're under arrest for federal conspiracy, communications fraud, and endangering public welfare. Richard Brennan slumped in his chair, staring at the error messages on his screens. 43 years in public service, he said quietly. 43 years keeping this county safe. Safe from what? I asked one final time. He looked up at me with the same cold hatred I'd seen in Jake's eyes so many times. Safe from people like you. As federal agents cuffed Richard Brennan and led him away, Agent Kim approached me with something that looked like relief mixed with professional satisfaction. Sarah, it's over. We've secured the communications systems, and the county DA is already preparing charges against 17 people in their network. Jake's looking at federal stalking charges plus conspiracy. His father's looking at 20 years minimum. I watched through the windows as Richard Brennan was loaded into a federal transport vehicle, the same type that had taken Jake away 3 hours earlier. Father and son, finally facing consequences for the system of control and abuse they built together. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma, asterisk federal agents just arrested Dr. Morrison at the hospital. She had files on 48 women she'd helped disappear over the years. You saved a lot of people, Sarah asterisk. For the first time in 6 months, I felt like I could breathe completely. The 911 operator had asked if the person was still there, and I'd known I was in danger. But the danger wasn't just Jake outside my door, it was the entire network.